Welcome to Life
on
Life's
Terms
with your host Justin
and Chelsey. Today we have Jamie Moffat in the studio with us.
Hey.
And
What?
we are going to be talking about his career in broadcasting and business marketing and sales, and also his journey with addiction and recovery. We got a lot to cover today. A lot of interesting stuff, I think. So thanks for coming today, Jamie.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be
It's
here.
awesome to have you sitting in on a microphone with us.
This is cool.
Yeah, we have a pro.
Right?
Well,
Right?
We're not even close.
Let's
believe
not get carried away.
Even just listening through the headsets to your natural radio voice, I feel like I need
I could put you to
amp up
sleep with my
game.
talk. Or
No.
You know what? There's been
I could read you a story.
Yeah, there's been listeners where they're like, you sometimes get like a little hypnotic when you're talking, and I'm like, that's not
about
good.
you?
Yeah, I'm like, that's not good.
Oops.
What the hell's going on?
Oh, that's so funny. I would disagree. Once upon a time, I was just a listener, and sometimes I'd be like, holy, he's going on a tangent right now.
That's cool.
That's what I do.
Tangent.
I try to be the Canadian version of Alex Jones. No, I'm kidding. Everybody's eyes just went like as big as quarters. What?
Pardon?
Hey, man, trying to make money. We're
All
just
right.
trying to make some money.
Yeah.
Yeah, broadcasting life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. So I'm a musician. So that's how it all started.
Okay.
I was a keyboard player in a 80s rock band. So now I'm aging myself. So now you can figure out.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's been around a while. So yeah, I was supposed to go to university. We were talking about my tuba earlier, and
Yeah.
and I literally am a classically trained tuba player, and played with the symphony in Prince George, where I grew up. And,
Awesome.
And I was going to university. I was supposed to go to UVic, and I was on a fast track into the music department there, and everything was going great. And then I got a letter from the admissions department saying, "Oh yeah, Mr. Moffat, we're sorry, but you're 2 credits shy of general admission, so you'll have to go get those before you can talk to us again."
Wow.
And I was like, "Shit." So yeah, you can swear on this thing.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is, this is kind of
yeah,
fun.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, mother, father.
Yeah.
So so yeah, it was massive disappointment, of course. And so I went to college because that's what you do, right? Well, I guess I was like 18, and I was like, okay, well, I'll go to community college. So I signed up for English and math, and figured, well, that should get me there, and got bored. And I discovered the Academy Pub.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I had a pretty big gap between my my morning English class and my late afternoon math class. So I
Had some time to kill.
drunken math, not good. Yeah, it's pretty hard to put the numbers together when you're hammered. So
When they're moving all over the
it's
page.
like, yeah, I remember my teacher chewing me out one time, saying, like, "Get out, you're drunk." And I'm like, "I'm not drunk." And I was sitting in the back, and I could barely hold myself up. So a harbinger of things to come, I guess. So the college thing was getting pretty old pretty fast, and some friends of mine were in town for the Christmas break, and I know it was before that. It was in November, I guess, and they were touring Western Canada, and they had this band, and I'd gone to high school with a couple of them, and they were playing at the Barn. Name of a bar in Prince George, and went down, and of course we were drinking our 70-cent draft and got hammered and partied with the band. And then they're like, "Dude, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, not much, going to college." They said, "Go buy a synthesizer and a piano and join us. We need you on the road with us." It's 1984, dude.
Here comes retirement.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Right.
so, okay, I'm like, I'm in a band again. And so I took my tuition money that my grandfather had left for me, and I bought an electric piano and a synthesizer, and I got my ear pierced, because that's what you need to do if you're going to be a rock star. And
Well, of course.
Right? And I went on the road, and we left Prince George on New Year's Day, and we drove to Edmonton.
There you go.
And we played, our first week was at the CI South, which is the Delta South Edmonton. And
Oh, okay.
in the basement there was a really cool bar, huge. And we were the headlining act that week, and it went from there. And that was my first trip to West Edmonton Mall too. So we went to there was a dance shop right beside the Ice Palace, and because I needed to buy some spandex.
Well, of course.
Right, so I had some teal spandex and a black T-shirt and a couple of bandanas that I'd wrap around my knee strategically, and some high top runners. Okay, think 1984 here. Okay, so and I had hair.
I was gonna say, what about the long hair?
Yeah, I had hair, and I had hairspray, and I had eyeliner.
There you go.
Oh man, what was the name of this band?
Feral, Feral. Like a feral cat.
For a lack of a better term, were you trying to mimic another band like Glass Tiger or something of that nature?
We were pre-Glass Tiger, actually. But yeah, it was the thing in the 80s, you know.
Like Depeche Mode?
No, we were more hard rock than that. We were more kind of like Journey, early Journey. Billy Idol was really huge then. Quiet Riot was, you know, we were, you know, that was kind of our jam was Quiet Riot, you know. Come on, feel the noise.
As a kid, I was boss.
Oh, okay.
At that age. My mom was really young when she had me.
Right.
So I was basically like the little brother.
Oh, okay.
In that whole entire. So I had the Levi's jeans, the Chucks, white T-shirt.
Yeah.
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 I remember it.
Yeah. It didn't last long, my 6 months on the road. So,
like I said, here comes retirement.
Yeah. I was like, holy shit, this is some crazy lifestyle. I mean, you know, like week to week, you play every night from, you know, 10 p.m. till about 2 a.m. and then you party the rest of the night away, and then you sleep till noon, and you get up and you rehearse with the band in the middle of the afternoon in between the stripper sets, and, you know, it's the real thing. It was the real deal. And, and then you do it again. And then on Saturday night, after you play till 2 a.m, you tear everything down, you pack up the truck, and we had a 3-ton cube van.
There you go.
You know, with we'd put our bass player's dad was an Italian grocer in Prince George, so he had a little bit of cash. And they had like a couch behind the 2 seats, and we had a little loft that we built. And there's like 8 of us, and, you know, occasionally a few extra girls, you know, for the ride.
Groupies.
Yep. And and so Saturday was hell, because we would pack everything up and move to the next location, wherever that might be. So it'd be Red Deer or Regina or Lethbridge. Or
did you make it out to Winnipeg to the old?
No.
The old gate to the east?
No, I made it as far east as Wadena, Saskatchewan. And then that was a different band I was playing with then, and they were heading to Thompson, Manitoba. And I said, no, I'm out of here.
you know, they don't have pavement on the roads up there.
Yeah, well, that's what I was afraid of. So I said, you can just ship my gear back to Prince George. I'm going to hitchhike to Regina and hang out with my aunt and uncle and catch a plane home. I'm out.
Those were the days, though, when you could actually hitchhike and not really have to worry. I mean, that whole Clifford Olson thing was going on, but he wasn't discovered yet.
No, exactly. This is before your time, dear. He was a serial killer on the West Coast. Yeah.
Okay.
He took the innocence of Canada, they say.
Yeah, he was.
Aside from Paul Bernardo. I mean, this guy was pre-Paul Bernardo.
I did hitchhike once, and I was very, very drunk when I did it, and it probably wasn't a very safe choice. No. I'm just lucky that I had somebody who was like, "What are you doing? Somebody's gonna pick you up who shouldn't pick you up."
Right.
And I'm like, okay. I even passed out in the vehicle and woke up in Edmonton. He's like, "Okay, you're home."
Nice. That was.
I lucked out. We'll just say that.
Yeah, we'll call that luck or the grace of God. One of those two.
Odd,
yes.
Whatever you.
Yeah. The hitchhiking to Regina was hilarious too, because I put my thumb out, and a pretty good-looking brunette in a convertible literally picked me up and took me to Regina.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
That was fun. Yeah. And then she told me all about her boyfriend, Yari Curry.
Oh.
I'm like, who? I was from BC. I was a Canucks fan.
Yeah.
Hated the Oilers.
Whole different world. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. It was a whole different world. But I got back to Prince George. Mom and Dad were opening a restaurant called Monk's. It was a very cool restaurant. And so I, of course, had a job waiting for me, waiting tables and helping out Mom and Dad with the restaurant. And I was waiting tables, and we had a family friend who was a jazz musician, and he and I were chatting. He goes, "Hey, Jamie, you've got a good radio voice. You should be in radio." And I'm like, "Radio? What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, I'm doing this jazz show on this new FM station here in town, and they need somebody to come in a couple nights a week and, you know, play some music and read the weather and, you know, 6-hour shift, Tuesday, Wednesday night. I said, sure. So I went and I auditioned. So I had to read some news copy onto a reel-to-reel player in a studio, and they hired me. That was how I got into radio.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Did they do the tongue twister thing with you where you on the read? No.
Oh man, I would fail that for sure.
No, you know, I mean, and you know, I aced English. English was easy for me. I was as a kid, like a much younger kid, my parents were involved in the, you know, live theater, you know, community theater project in Prince George. So I was hanging out at the theater. So I ended up taking drama lessons when I was like 9, and I was on stage as a kid, you know, in various different plays from 9, 10, 11, and in through high school. So, you know, came to grade 11 and 12 English, and whenever Shakespeare came out, they always threw the book at me and said, "Here, Moffat, you read it," right? Because I could, right? And so radio was really a natural thing for me to jump into.
Yeah.
You know, because I was given this voice and I was trained on how to use it. And so I started in radio, working a couple of days a week, just, you know, playing, like, I'd play an hour of classical music and then the jazz show and then a big band show and then some easy listening music, and I'd like break in at the top of the hour and read the weather forecast, and the bottom of the hour and I'd read the sports scores, and that was my shift.
Sorry, where were you at this point?
Prince George.
Back in Prince George.
Yeah, back in PG.
I have a question
stinky town.
about your when you were having your little band tour.
Yeah.
How did your parents feel about it?
Well,
were they just like, "Hey, see you later, Jamie"?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah, my girlfriend was the one who was a little more concerned.
Oh, I bet.
For good reason. Yeah, well, that was probably the main reason I came back, was because the girlfriend said, "Yeah, you should probably come home now." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And so,
as like this saying, it reminds me of this saying that I heard just a little while ago. If you itch your palm, it means you're getting money. If you itch your crotch, no, it says if you itch your palm, it means you're getting something. If you itch your crotch, you already have it.
Oh, there it is. I haven't heard that, but it makes sense.
Yeah, especially in the 80s, right?
100%. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Is it easier to work for a radio station if you like the genre of music that's being played as opposed, or do you just?
I think so.
Kind of take it on. Like,
yeah, no,
I like it.
I mean, I would think so. I know that as my career progressed, I started behind the microphone, and then I went to, you know, the music was not what I listened to at home. It wasn't part of my record collection. Let's put it that way. I couldn't find, you know, Master of Puppets and Metallica or old Van Halen or anything in there. It was like, oh. But yeah, so I mean, I still loved it. I loved being on the microphone and talking to listeners. And then, you know, you'd get phone calls from listeners, and you'd actually, you know, and they're like, "Hey, yeah, I really appreciate you, you know, doing this." And you know, and sometimes you get those weird calls too.
Yeah.
Right.
I can imagine.
You know, when I was working evenings, a funny story. I moved down to the AM station, which was the big station at the time.
Oh, cool.
And I was doing overnights, and then I moved into doing sort of a weekend swing shifts and stuff. And I was working a Saturday night, and a friend of mine and I, we were going to a toga party. And I had already quit drinking at this point, and I'll back up and tell a little more about that story in a bit. But we were going to a toga party, but he brought some mushrooms, so we had some mushrooms because, you know, we were in BC. They're prevalent there. So we had some mushrooms, and so about an hour before my show, I took some mushrooms before my show ended.
Okay.
Right? So I'm starting to have some fun here, and then I got a call from this listener, and there was this young lady who would phone me on a fairly often basis and describe in really excruciatingly graphic detail what she planned to do to me sexually.
Oh.
And it was kind of fun. You know, it was the 80s. It was, you know, this is pre-900 numbers. So it was kind of fun. And so I would, you know, have these conversations with this girl every once in a while. And so she called me up, and it was like about 11:30. And I had the all-night guy, and he's getting in the studio, getting his music ready. And I have my buddy in the studio. And so I've got these big speakers in my studio. And so I put her on the speakers, and then I put a cassette tape in the deck, and I hit record. And then I'm going, "So tell me, what do you want to do?" And so she went into graphic detail, and I, of course, led her on because I was an asshole. And she was in a closet doing things to herself. And, you know, anyway, so we were killing ourselves laughing, absolutely dying laughing. So, so yeah, that was kind of one of my highlights. And then, and then I said, okay, I got to go now. Bye.
And is this when you were high on mushrooms?
Yes. And I was at work.
That was probably pretty
in
trippy,
radio.
right?
Yeah, it was pretty hilarious. And then we went to the toga party and we partied all night. So
Did you think to invite her to the toga party?
I don't think she was old enough.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah. I didn't know for sure. I'd never met her. I'd only had conversations with her, so I didn't want to risk that. So I said, okay.
Better safe.
Yeah, definitely better safe than sorry.
It's only bait right now. It's not jail.
Yeah, I prefer not to go to jail. Thank you very much. So that was radio in Prince George was an interesting experience. When I got into it, I was kind of bright-eyed, and I was really kind of wowed by the whole star factor, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I was literally, I'd work the all-night shift, and I'd make coffee for the guy I grew up listening to in the morning,
That'd
right?
be really cool.
Yeah.
And he was a cool guy, Michael Caine, really, that was his on-air name, and he was a funny guy, and he took me under his wing, and after I'd literally hang out and watch him do his show, and then we'd go hang out at his place afterwards and smoke some dope and watch Monty Python. On VHS. But it was fun, and I loved it. And I remember going to this party, and one of our DJs was moving to Vancouver, so he was going to the big leagues, and he was going to work on LG 73, which is kind of like what Ched used to be before it became a talk station. Like it was a top 40 radio station in Vancouver, and so I was at this party, and we drank a bunch of beer, and then we smoked some dope, and then I went home. And my girlfriend, the same one when I was in the band, she was working at Boston Pizza, and she was doing the night shift, night manager. And so I called her when I got home, said, "Hey, I'm home," and I was really drunk and really messed up, and I was sitting in this chair talking to her on the phone, and I proceeded to barf all over myself.
Oh, yeah.
And she heard all this because I was, bleh.
Yeah.
I can only imagine what it sounded like.
Just Prince Charming over there.
Hot. So my daughter would say, "That's so hot." So I'm sitting there, all covered in puke. So I wipe off the phone, and then it was raining, and I went outside, and in my drunken smartness, I decided, hey, we got a clothesline. I'll just hang my shirt on the clothesline, and that'll wash all the puke off, and then I'm going to go pass out.
Sunlight disinfectant.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I just threw it on there, and I went and I passed out. And so my girlfriend comes home to our place and sees me passed out and snoring, and she's pissed. And then she goes outside and sees my shirt on the clothesline, right? And so she rips it off. But of course, I put it puke side in.
Oh, no.
And so she's covered in puke now.
Oh.
So yeah, that was hot. And so
I'm sure she's very,
Just
very
so
happy at this time.
Yeah, it's
she
just
was
so
so
considerate,
happy that she was my girlfriend. Yeah, absolutely. So proud of me. And so we sit down in the morning, and she's like having coffee. I'll never forget this. It was a long, long time ago. But she goes, "So I have this friend. His name's Stu, and he's in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'd like you to sit down and have a conversation with him."
I bet you would.
Okay, sure. What am I going to do? Say no? And so, I sat down with Stu, and we went to a donut place, and he told me his story, and I quit drinking and joined Alcoholics Anonymous at 19.
Wow.
And
Young.
yeah, and so then I didn't quit using other drugs whenever they showed up. Somebody passed me a joint, sure, or mushrooms in the studio, like I talked about. This was after I'd quit drinking. But yeah, so I quit drinking, and I stayed sober.
Air quotes.
Air
quotes. Sorry, we're on radio podcast here, so yeah, air quotes. I stayed quote unquote sober. And then, we proceeded to get engaged, the girl and I, and then we were planning the wedding.
I look right away at Chelsey because it's very similar to Chelsea's story.
No, okay.
is it?
No.
What?
Mine's a little different. I was full blown still drinking and using every drug under the sun, and I got married in my living room.
Nice.
Yeah.
Were you wasted when you got married?
I don't even remember doing it to this day.
So she was trying to save herself, thinking that she could get sober through marriage.
Well, I was like, man, my life, I'm such a fuck up. But if I'm married and have have a husband. At least I'm doing something right.
There you go.
Fuck.
You can check that off the list.
I'm kind of thinking you were in the
Pretty much.
Steamboat? Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Go, yeah,
I figured, well, I might as well marry her. I mean, no, she was a very, very kind young lady. She was lovely. And so we got engaged, and then we got married. And the night before I got married, this is funny. I had friends who liked to party, and we got married in Quesnel, BC, and because that's where my future, well, soon-to-be wife was from. And so we went down to Quesnel to do the wedding at a church, and then, and so on. And so the night before, we were at her parents' place where we were going to have the reception afterwards. They lived in a, sort of out in a little acreage outside of Quesnel, and we're planning the party, and my friends are there, and I've got one of my buddies is going to do the DJ thing, and they brought the stereo down in the white pedo van, right? And so they had like these big Serwin Vega speakers, they're like 4 feet high, and they had 4 of those and a couple of like really big amplifiers, and they hooked them up to the car battery so that they could listen to the tunes for the 75-mile drive from Prince George to Quesnel. And so they were setting up the PA system and all of that stuff. And so, so we're getting ready for this. This is going to be, I was the first one of the group to get married, so this was going to be an epic party. And I'm sober. But
I was gonna say you're still sober at this point, right?
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
Air quotes sober.
No, I was sober. I didn't drink. I didn't know alcohol past these lips at that point. But somebody found some acid.
Of course.
So that was fun. So we all dropped acid at 10 o'clock at night the night before I got married.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, right. Because,
smart.
That's a good idea.
It's a great idea, yeah.
Going in front of a crowd of people.
Let's stay up all night the night we're supposed to get married. I'm not going to sleep anyway, so I might as well get high. So we drop acid, and then we go downtown, and we party it up, and... Oh my God, yeah. And so 2 o'clock we went and closed down the bar, and of course I was the driver because I didn't drink.
The logic behind all of this.
Okay, we're all 20-year-olds at the time. Think about that for a second. So, we're smart. Frontal lobe is totally not connected. So we went to the bar, and my friends got drunk, and they tried to make me drink, and I still refused to drink because I'm an alcoholic.
Yeah, not a drug addict.
I'm wasted on acid, but I'm an alcoholic, so I don't drink. And so we go back to the hotel, and the hotel was what was it called? The Casbah. So of course our theme song was "Rockin' the Casbah." Yeah. And it had big, it was like a 60s thing. They had a big neon sign, "World's largest TV screen," because behind the motel was a drive-in theater, right? And they had like speakers in all the rooms, and all the rooms faced the back, so you could literally be in your room and you could watch the drive-in show. So it was kind of cool. And so my friends decided to move the stereo system into the hotel at 3 a.m. and turn it on. And that lasted about 5 seconds until my dad, who was about 6'2", 240, basically kicked the door down and said, "No." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And so they packed everything up, and then I went to my room, and I stayed with my brother and sister-in-law and my 2-year-old niece. And I stared at the ceiling for the rest of the night, and I was quite entertained. And then I helped my 2-year-old niece. We had a couple conversations in the middle of the night because she had to go potty. And so I was doing the uncle thing, and it was bizarre. It was very bizarre. And then I get up in the morning, and there's my buddies in the white van, and they're sitting there. They're all brutally hungover, and they're looking underneath the front end of the van, and they're trying to figure out why there's a tree sticking out of the front of their van. And none of them could remember why or how. So that was the beginning of my wedding weekend. So, yeah, it was fun.
Did you try to turn the van into a unicorn?
Pretty much, yeah. There was this about an 8-inch in diameter spruce tree broken off and shredded, and it was stuck right under the front suspension of this thing, sticking out. It was like a battering ram. It was the weirdest thing. So. And
were you the driver?
No, I stayed in the motel all night, but they went out and decided to go 4-by-in their van, but none of them can remember it because they were all wasted. This is at 3, 4 in the morning.
Oh, after you went back.
Driven them all home.
Yeah. Then they decided to go driving.
Better heads prevailed and decided they needed to go.
Yeah, I know. It was crazy. So I married the girl, and then we moved to Kamloops shortly after, about a year. Yeah, I guess about a year later, And then when I was living in Kamloops, things kind of I was working for a rock and roll radio station, so I finally got on, was living the dream. So I'm working rock and roll radio, playing music I like to listen to.
Right.
Although they were throwing in like OMD and Pet Shop Boys and stuff like that too, which I was kind of tolerated. But
do I have to?
I remember getting in trouble one night because I went off the playlist and I played like 4 Play Long Time by Boston and
Well, because there's so much Canadian content. Canadian content was probably
huge,
a big deal back then.
And there wasn't very good Canadian content in the 80s, right? Now there's lots of great stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the other thing too. Even looking at the radio thing in Canada right now, you look at American DJs and what they make and their salaries, and then you look at Canadian DJs. All the morning guys make. Gardner Andrews on Sonic makes. He's the one. He's the breadwinner on that station.
Absolutely.
Any of those morning people are, and then the further you go throughout the day, they're chucking them the $35,000-$40,000 salary, and
or they're voice tracking, and they're bringing some guy in out of Florida who's on 300 radio stations, and he's making good money.
Yeah, and then in America, you also they don't have American content. They can play whatever they want, and Canada becomes this microcosm of 40% or 45% of Canadian artists have to be on there. And then when you get into Quebec, it's Quebec music and also Canadian music and then whatever else you want to play, which it doesn't leave for a lot of competition in regards to artists.
Right.
That's the one thing that I'm a musician too.
Right.
And trying to get things out. That's why I backed out of the whole music industry, was because you don't own it. You don't own your music. It's theirs. They own it. They're going to make whatever they want to make off of it. And you basically just work for them. I mean, basically artists walk away with a salary for the first 5 years. They're not
lucky.
Yeah, they're not. And they get the prestige of traveling here and there, but really your bills are only paid for when you're traveling. A lot of people don't know that about music artists. Right?
They don't get paid like they used to. I mean, I've seen the whole transition.
Yeah.
Because it started in the radio business in the mid '80s, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, and back then, we would line up to buy albums. I mean, we'd do road trips to Vancouver to go to A&B Sound because they had the best record collection, and we'd buy albums. And then, of course, I got into the radio business. I met A&R people, and working with the artists and interviewing artists and getting to know the musicians, which was a real treat. I remember interviewing Tom Cochran when I was in Kamloops, and that was like a real highlight for me because we did the interview, and then we spent like 20 minutes just talking about being in a band and recording and doing all those
Tom Cochran's
cool things.
Really cool, actually.
Super nice guy.
I met him in Toronto, and then there was this other guy. And I'll trash this guy all the time. I don't even give a fuck.
Is he with Nickelback?
No. So I was in Toronto, and I walk into this guitar shop. There's this big fat fuck with gray hair sitting on this stool that could probably be a dildo in his ass, and he's playing.
Wow.
He's playing No Sugar Tonight, like to the fucking T.
Yeah.
Right. And I was just like, I started playing guitar when I was 8. Still play now, and I aspired, right? Like, that's so cool, that riff, that whole riff, the whole thing, a D and that, just the catch of it. And I wanted to learn it. And, this was the time when, like, internet wasn't around. You actually had to read tabs. You had to go out and do your research. You couldn't just, like, look up a video and some motherfucker just show you, right?
Yeah.
So I walked up to him, as scared as I was. I said, can you show me how to play that? Who's sitting in front of me? Randy fucking Bachman.
Really?
And you know what? He treated me like an asshole.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Wouldn't talk to me. When nothing. What are you doing here? You should be in school.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm fucking skipping school because I'm a guitar player. Like,
that's what guitar players do.
It's not even noon yet. I'm not supposed to be at school. There's no drugs that need to be sold yet. Like,
my customers are still in class.
Exactly. I don't need lunch money yet.
Wow.
So yeah,
that's a shame.
And I'll he was not cool with me at all.
That's a shame.
And who taught me how to play guitar was the guitar player out of they played Gypsy Queen with
April Wine.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So the family member of mine was dating him.
Oh, nice.
I'm not going to say exactly who because things get strange that way.
Right.
But it was like more than just a family member.
Okay.
It was like somebody I saw every day.
Okay.
So my first guitar was stolen.
Oh, okay.
Because my family couldn't afford to get me a guitar.
Wow.
And he saw that there was this thing there, and he was like banging somebody in my house.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't have sisters, so.
Oh, okay. Wow. All right.
So then, and maybe my mom's other name is Janine.
Okay.
So that's how that all happened.
Wow, that's an interesting story.
So I learned all chords,
Yeah.
everything right then and there on like
That's really cool.
some piece of shit Sears guitar.
April Wine, I think, was the second band I saw. Triumph was the first one I saw.
Yeah, they were cool too.
Yeah,
Man. Glass Tiger wasn't bad.
Yeah, no, they
had a couple good.
I make fun of them because they got overplayed because they were Canadian.
Well, of course, yeah.
It's like Platinum Blonde. It's like, ugh.
Yeah.
I remember I introduced Platinum Blonde to Kamloops because we were presenting them, and it was one of those, they're playing at the Coliseum in Kamloops, and I was the local DJ who got to be the MC.
That's
for that
cool.
night. That was kind of fun, yeah. It's like, hey, Kamloops, you ready to rock? It's Platinum Blonde, dude. It's not rock. And anyway.
Did you like putting that facadish voice away, though, when you left radio? Because, that's kind of weird.
Rodney Radio?
Yeah.
It's funny because my friends over the years, they always, every once in a while they'll bring up The Voice, right? And it's like, hey, early on it was like, Jamie, talk radio to me. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like Mr. Radio Guy, right? And then, I had this friend of mine that I worked with in the late 80s in Vancouver, and he was a real character. He was a drummer, and a really good one, Chad. Anyway, and so he would say, coming at you on a beam of light. He would always say that whenever he saw me, right? Because I was the radio guy.
Yeah,
so he would always mock me and make fun of me, but it was kind of his love language, I guess. But yeah, it's, radio is so much fun. Lots of parties, working pretty crazy hours at first, and then I moved into, a more senior position, and I got better hours, and, working, I remember my weekend mornings were actually a cool shift. I'd work 6 to noon, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah.
And Sunday was a fun day because I'd play music from 6 till 10, and then we'd have some syndicated stuff come in from, be like American Top 40, Casey Kasem's,
I remember
show.
Casey Kasem, man.
Love that
TV
stuff.
show, that
and
was
we'd get
so cool.
We'd get these big-ass reel-to-reels mailed into us from Westwood One Radio, and then I'd have to set them up and play them. That was before we digitized everything. So I would set up these tapes, and then I had the afternoon gal would come in, and she would just kind of keep an eye on things, and I'd say, okay, I got to take off, and I would take off, and I would go pick up a station vehicle, and then I'd go pick up a contest winner or two, and we go out to the airport, and then we get in a helicopter, and we go for a little tour of the city for an hour.
No, that's cool.
Right, and then we drop off the winners, and then I would go to Barbecue with the Boss promo we were doing, which is at this really cool place called Mickey P's right on the Thompson River in downtown Kamloops, and has, steak and corn on the cob and stuff. And then I was on the water ski demo team, so after lunch I'd go and I'd water ski all afternoon, and I did that every Sunday all summer.
Sounds like a pretty fun Sunday.
Yeah, and then I met one day I was kind of bored. I smoked a joint, and I was out wandering the streets of Kamloops, and I walked into a music store because that's what musicians do.
Yeah.
And I found a keyboard rack, and I was playing some keys, and one of the employees comes over and goes, "Hey dude, you're pretty good." He goes, "You in a band?" I'm like, "No." He goes, "We're looking for a keyboard player."
I bet you are.
And so I ended up joining this band, and we had lots of fun. We literally called ourselves Blue Steel. So back in 1986.
That was a pair of strings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's where he got the name from, our guitarist, right?
He's lucky he didn't get sued the shit out of, because I think Fender owns that stuff.
Probably. And then there was a movie with Jamie Lee Curtis called Blue Steel that came out shortly after that. But we never made it big enough to get sued. But we had some fun, and really interesting Edmonton connection here. So I'm working for a radio station in Kamloops that was owned by CFCW Limited. And so they had two stations here, CFCW and Light 96, and they used to be over on 99th Street. And in the 80s, the FM rules were pretty strict about foreground content. So you had to create new content all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so and it was all about promoting local artists. It was a license requirement with the CRTC.
I think it still is.
It is, yeah. And so what they had done at Light 96 is they created this 1-hour show on Sunday nights. It was like a local band showcase. And they bring a band in, and they had a really nice recording studio at the radio station. They had they had 1-inch tape, and they had it was beautiful. And they had a grand piano in there and everything. And so they would invite local bands in to record, and then they'd interview the band, and they'd create this show. And so we got invited from Kamloops to come up to Edmonton and do this. So it was a really cool week. for us to come up here and sit in the studio, and we cut some demos, and then I brought the tape back and I gave them to our music director in Kamloops, and I said, "What do you think?" And he said, there's a couple songs on here we could add. And so they did. And so they grabbed a couple songs and they added them to the playlist at K97 Kamloops, where I worked.
Yeah.
And one of the coolest moments as a disc jockey for me was coming out of a song that I played on in my band and back selling it and saying, "Hey, yeah, that's Kamloops' very own Blue Steel," and blah, 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 blah. And I'm on the radio playing my music. And yeah, it was pretty cool.
That is really cool, man.
For a 21-year-old kid, it was a lot of fun.
I kind of want to know what you feel and what you think about the CRTC. I mean, America has the FCC.
Yes,
which
they
is
do.
The equivalent to our, well, I don't think the FCC is strict as the CRTC.
It's, I've worked with American radio stations, and FCC is
Just
very
as
strict. Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, the rules are different, but they're more limiting. American radio is totally different than Canadian radio. They've granted so many more licenses, so it's so much more competitive on the dial. Like a city of like the size of Edmonton, 1.3 million in the States, we have like 24 commercial licensed stations in Edmonton, and we're the most competitive market per capita in the country.
Yeah.
You go into a market the same size in the States, and they'd have 50 or 60 stations.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Right. And so the market share is that much smaller, right? So it's that much more difficult to make money in radio. The CRTC, how do I feel about the CRTC? They serve an important purpose to radio because, without regulation, then it's like the internet.
Well, in this, yeah.
Right. But it served a purpose at the time. Let's put it that way. I actually got to spend some time with one of the former commissioners who co-wrote the Canadian content policy, and he told some interesting stories. He was a university student. The CRTC basically grabbed a whole bunch of university students, and they hired them in the 70s and said, "Okay, your task is to figure out Canadian content rules." And so they wrote the Canadian content policy, and these guys all had ponytails and were smoking pot, and they're fresh out of Laurier and McGill and U of T and so on in Carleton. Really interesting story when he was talking about how they wrote the Canadian content rules, and they've of course morphed and changed and adapted over time.
You're telling me.
The challenge is, of course, back then it was like Gordon Lightfoot and Anne Murray, and that was it, right?
Yeah.
You didn't have any real great Canadian content. And then, that talks to the music industry as well, right? And you touched on it earlier, is the challenge is musicians today, to get played on the radio is not a big deal anymore.
Yeah.
Because you don't make any money from it like
That's
you used
right.
to. You only make money. I mean, like Spotify. Oh, I had 1 million plays on Spotify. Here's your $11 check. Thanks very much. Right? It's like, what the fuck?
But
right?
I think that, so I did hear this. Steven Tyler was on Joe Rogan's podcast bitching about how he's not getting any royalties from his old music.
Right.
And a lot of the reason for that is because law about copyright and royalty has transcended so much from that time that it really missed the whole loop in renegotiation. Okay, so he lost that money. But if you look at somebody like Cypress Hill, who's a newer artist, and when he pumps out new content, like we get a portion of royalty when it's achieved so many downloads. Right. So, and that royalty actually, because it's generated foreverness.
Right.
Like literally the license on this podcast is forever. You will never see an episode go away.
Right.
We own the rights to Life on Life's Terms podcast.
Nice.
Somebody else could start Life on Life's Terms podcast with lowercase whatever, and that's fine. But we entirely own the royalty forever.
Right.
By download the whole bit. So I think that's where the whole royalty and legality has transcended from like the 70s, 80s, early 90s even.
Right.
This is what Napster made.
Exactly.
This whole new rigmarole of we're getting paid for downloads now.
Right.
Like, fuck you, I own that music. Like, come and you want to fight? We'll go and fight about it. Because that's really what it's become, especially with Spotify, all these things, is how do you protect yourself?
Right.
And really, before artists used to bank on merch, even in the 80s, merchandise was like the biggest thing that made you money. merchandise is completely gone now. The record companies have taken that off of the table entirely. They own that.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing that these, like you look at Drake, look at where his money really comes from. He didn't buy the Raptors because of his music. He bought the Raptors because he owns his music. He
Right.
owns his downloading right. And that's what was the game changer.
The downloads and the tours.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
the tours,
Right. That's
yeah.
where they're really making their money, you know. I mean, is they're negotiating deals with Live Nation and you know, the tour companies and saying, okay, well, I'll play, but you know, you got to give me X amount of the take of the door,
Yeah.
right? And I mean, I was looking at tickets to go see Elton John. I was like, you know,
Crazy.
$450 for a nosebleed, and I'm like, you know, yeah, Elton's in the business of making money, and good for him, and he deserves it because he's an amazing, unbelievable artist. But you know, at the same time, I'm you know, for me and my wife to go to see Elton John, I'm not spending $1,000.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Especially for the nosebleeds.
Right, you know.
Well, and I think that's the thing. Just to go down memory road with Alan Cross. If you look or remember when Pearl Jam was fighting Ticketmaster,
Right.
That was what that entire beef was about, you know, making it so that people could actually come to the show and not have to like bankrupt their house in order to come to a show.
Yeah.
And then you had Pearl Jam trying to print their own tickets. But what came out of that was Ticketmaster owns the copyright on any ticket being printed.
That's right.
And it doesn't matter if it's the ballet or if it's a
And they get a piece of
band.
every ticket printed.
Yeah. Everything that's printed, they own it.
Yep.
And so now when you have Live Nation coming out, spending all this money, this is where basically the one who gets stuck is the customer walking in through the door. You know, so I'm a Folk Fest guy. I'm going to Edmonton Folk
Awesome.
Fest this year. So we're on the line for media passes for the
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah.
We're hoping
Nice.
to be the first podcast
Oh, that'd be cool.
at
Wouldn't
Folk
it be?
Fest.
That'd be
Oh, yeah.
fantastic. Yeah.
to get some of these artists to come just do quick promos. Right,
Yeah,
right
sure,
thing,
yeah.
You know? They haven't seen that yet. And back to the CRTC thing, they were trying to gauge us on how they can get us under. So we're Wigmore rule known, like we know what those rules are, so
Right.
on and so forth. We have a lawyer, the whole bit.
Good.
And CRTC was approaching us saying, would you voluntarily come on? I'm not volunteering anything that says I have to be under regulation when I'm on the internet. And that was a contentious issue between CRTC and most of the podcasting in Canada. Even if you look at Alberta Podnet,
Right.
we were going to go work with them, but their issue was we couldn't go out and get our own sponsors.
Oh, okay.
That's
Yeah.
our income.
No kidding, right? That's how you pay your rent. I get it. No, 100%.
We're not passing the buck off to the listeners.
Yeah.
You know, it's our sponsors that essentially pay us. So when they said that, and they're like, you can only sponsor ATB, I was like, well, fuck it. We're going to what's the other bank? Credit. We're going to the other credit union.
Service Credit
Yeah.
Union.
Service Credit
Yeah.
Union. That's who our bank
There you
is.
go.
For
Free plug for you, Service Credit Union. You're welcome.
Exactly.
There you
So
go.
I think that
Make sure you call us.
that's why I was kind of wondering where you're at with CRTC, because in the beginning it looked really cool, and then now,
Well, times have changed so much just in the last 10 years. With podcasting, I mean, it was the whole audio space has changed so much, and I've really been immersed in it. I was working with a streaming and podcasting company where we were selling technology to radio stations and radio groups. I mean, I was in iHeart Studios in Burbank, California.
you can get us on iHeart Radio right now.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we're on it.
Excellent.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I've been to I've been to iHeart's headquarters in Tribeca in New York City, and I've met with some real high level people who rule the space, and they're trying to figure it all out. And this was 5-6 years ago, but it's really interesting sitting down with Ryan Seacrest's boss's boss and talking about the future of radio and the future of podcasting. I still have a love and a passion for radio. I think it's so important. I listen to the radio. It's in my car. I mean, I listen to podcasts. My family are more YouTubers than me. I'm an audio guy,
Yeah.
right? I mean, because I'm always moving, right? I ride my bike. I go for runs. I drive far too much in the city, because I'm an outside sales guy, so I'm out and about doing my thing, oot and a boot, as they say in Canada.
And I think the thing is as well, when you look at these local radio stations that we're seeing here in Edmonton, they can't afford to keep their DJs fed anymore. Like you look at Michelle Wright.
Yeah.
Off of K97. She's probably the second biggest.
Yeah.
Terry, Bill, and Steve is no longer Terry, Bill, and Steve.
Right.
I mean, Garner Andrews was smart enough to come in single-handed and run the show.
And he's the number one radio show in Canada.
Yeah.
Like he wins. I've been in Toronto at the Canadian Music Week, and and I've shaken. I've sat right next to the Rogers table, and I've watched him go up and win. Top major market morning show, Garner Andrews. I mean, the guy is fantastic.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about Garner and what he does, and what I love about it, is he's not a typical radio guy. He doesn't have the big deep voice.
Yeah.
He's not just back selling music and telling stupid stories. He's created a whole community inside his show, right? And that's where podcasting gets its magic
100%.
from. Is the community, the community of listeners, and you're responsive to the people who are listening to you and downloading your show, right?
Yeah.
So they're part of your tribe, right?
Like Garner said this to me. He goes, "My biggest talent is people think I give a fuck." And those are his actual words. He's like, "My biggest talent is people think I give a fuck, and to tell you the truth, I don't.
Yeah,
it's my job. That's
exactly.
what I do." And I think, because him and I have had conversation about why is podcasting going to become the giant. He said, well, because there's no persona.
Right.
Those people who are in podcasting are not playing the radio voice or any of that.
Right.
It's them, and so you cannot contain that with a CRTC gag order saying you can't talk about this and you can't talk about that, because it's really your audience that's pushing you, right? Like we got into tons of shit about the Omar Kadar thing, and that was tons and tons of shit. But it's like, do what you want. I mean, we do have freedom of expression here in Canada, and I'm going to use that to its fullest ability, right? So I would not back down. How are your feelings about the $5.95 million that Justin Trudeau's pumping out to media companies to bail him out?
That's a
Could you hear that sigh?
Can
I be any louder with that sigh? Yeah. Oh, Justin. Are
you saying this to me? Yes,
no, Trudeau. I like you. He's. I don't even know how to put it into words sometimes. He just frustrates the hell out of me. He's given money away to companies that don't need it. Yeah. Right. And he's, because he's surrounded himself with people who are, yes people, and he's just feeding them money and he's giving them gifts. He's so typical and so prototypical to the pork belly politics, as they call it, where, if you support me in the next election, I will make sure you win this contract. I mean, it's collusion. It's there. There's nothing fair about it. It's an elected dictatorship that we live in here in Canada. And of course, I'm a Westerner. I'm born in Alberta, raised in BC, and I've been in Alberta for 20 years. And I have no fond things to say about Trudeau, the drama teacher. He can fall down a set of stairs. Pretty cool. Yeah, you should watch that video.
He can cry pretty good.
Yeah, and
I'm pretty sure that's on cue.
He's not a very good speaker. He's hot. He's good looking. There's no doubt about it.
Apparently it was his hair that 46% of women voted in. It wasn't really his policy.
For real?
Yeah. That's a real thing.
How do you guys feel about that?
Well, I think.
Oh, she's laughing at us because we have no hair. That's nice.
That's right.
Thanks, Chelsey.
Thanks. Yeah.
Oh, it would have been funnier if the listeners could see.
We're both bald.
So let's go back to that whole marriage thing for 1 second.
I walked right into that one.
That's kind of cool. And you didn't do it in Vegas either. That's crazy.
I know. I don't even know the full Vegas story.
Yeah.
That'll be the next one.
Do you find that this is just a this money? So we did a hashtag.
Yeah.
Not accepting of money.
Okay.
Okay.
Good.
And we were part of Rebel Media.
Yeah.
A whole bunch of the other, air quotes, semi-big, independent media companies in Canada. Right. Press for Truth, so on and so forth. Those guys. We put out that hashtag, and then you had CBC right away just cut us.
Of course.
And then you had Global News just cut us and condemn us. And you're starting to see like we're alt-right all of a sudden, or you're crazy lefties or whatever you are. You just get basically a stereotypical generalization into a polarized
Well, you're a
vector.
threat.
Yeah.
Right.
And this is how they deal with the threat. When really, getting that 595 million, what's that, or billion? I think it's a billion. I think it's a B.
Yeah.
I think what's going to end up happening is just going to perpetuate more state media. And CRTC effectively, I think unintentionally, has become that contributor towards all of these major media conglomerates here in Canada, perpetuating state media without ever recognizing it, really.
And that's the thing. Like I said, in the U.S., if you've got, $50,000, you can send in a letter and an application to the FCC, and you can, hire an engineer to do a quick engineering report, and you can get a radio station.
Yeah.
And you can get a low power FM station, so like 40 watts. You can put it on the roof of your building. You reach, a 50 block radius.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can tell your story, and it's public airwaves. You still have to follow the rules of, good taste, and you can't, say fuck, shit, piss, cunt, whore, slut, motherfucker, tits on the radio. But you can broadcast your passion, right? And so, and if you want to put a religious radio station on, you can do that. You want to, and you've got your church, and I've seen it. I've seen churches in the States where they actually get an FM radio station license. Right. And so the church can then play music that they would play in their worship sets on the weekend, and they can play that music for their church family. And they might only have 1,000 listeners or 500 listeners, but it still works.
Yeah.
Right. Here, that's impossible in Canada.
Yeah.
It's absolutely impossible. You need millions of dollars and a lot of time to go through the application process. I mean, you can do it for under $1 million under the, with the application process. And I have friends who've actually won licenses in Alberta and smaller markets. And, you win a radio license, it's the same as winning the lottery. Only the odds are better that you'll win the lottery.
Yeah. So I always wanted to be in radio. I was a kid who read stuff on the radio when I was real young.
Yeah.
And when I was looking at that whole entire deal, when I realized that the illusion of the music industry was great, just shattered.
It's amazing. It's amazing how much you and I are alike.
I thought maybe radio might be pretty cool. And then what I realized very quickly when I was looking into radio was I don't want to read out what other people tell me to read out. I'm too opinionated for that. I'm, as air quotes they say, a real addict. Fuck you, right? I'm not saying that bullshit. I want to say what I want to say.
Right.
And I didn't want to disseminate horseshit, is what was always my thought. And then when the podcasting thing came around, I was gagged by two not-for-profits that I was working for, saying you can't talk about what you want to talk about publicly. And then from there, I just said, piss on that.
Good for you.
And I did the podcast anyways.
Good for you.
And, this has been the best thing I've ever, like I said, this is my favorite job throughout the week. I wouldn't change it. We get to do whatever the hell we want to do. Nobody's dictating to us what we have to say, aside from sponsors when they're coming through.
Which is really super cool because, we're having just a conversation here. There was no script.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There's no talking points or anything like that. We're just kind of riffing here, and it's fun.
Yeah, it is.
I love it.
It's like we went over because Wigmore rules dictate that we have to talk about what we're going to talk about prior to the show, and then you write a consent.
Right.
Yeah, that's why we do that, right?
Okay, yeah.
And so we have to have that outline, and then we know not to go past those parameters,
right?
So to say, right? Because last thing you want to do is talk about climate change, and the guy just goes,
"What?"
I learned that the hard way.
Did you?
I did.
That's good.
You
I said two words that nobody wants to hear, apparently.
But it's like, why don't you ask me about abortion?
Oh,
shit,
here
that's
we
not
go.
polarizing.
Wow. Yeah, we could go down those rabbit trails in a hurry. Yeah.
So you were talking about working for a podcasting, marketing.
Yeah.
Podcast,
it was interesting. My career has taken a really unique journey. I went from working as a disc jockey at a radio station, did that for a few years, and it ended. And I went to Vancouver. I wanted to be on the air in Vancouver, the big city, the bright lights. Couldn't find a job on air, so I was surviving. So I was, doing what it takes. And, I sold pianos for a couple of years. I did telemarketing. Because I've got the voice, and it was kind of fun. Some of it was kind of slimy, like when I was selling, lottery subscriptions to Americans. That was kind of weird. But when I was selling, ballet subscriptions to past subscribers and opera subscriptions, and I'm a bit of an artsy guy, and so, I could get behind it, and this kind of comes
But
back.
you didn't like the jazz.
Love the jazz.
Love
jazz.
Okay.
ABC, anything but country. So. And here
Anything but country.
Now we just got like 50% of Albertans.
Oops, sorry.
No, that's okay.
I've won 2 Canadian Country Music Awards, if that helps. So,
You just didn't like your competitors.
oh yeah, no, that was really cool. That was when I stumbled back into radio in Vancouver in the early 90s. I was waiting tables, I didn't have a job or a career, let's put it that way. And a friend of mine, she was my roommate actually, she worked for a trafficking company, which they scheduled ads for radio stations all over Canada. And they had a Christmas luncheon in Vancouver. It was the Broadcasters Association of BC, BCAB. And so they went for this luncheon thing, and she called me at like 5 o'clock from lunch, air quotes again, and said, so we're going for dinner, and Tony's buying, so grab your girlfriend and come on down. I'm like, okay, free supper, I'm in. And it was, so we went down and we ended up having dinner, and I sat across the table from this guy named Bob, who was the sales manager of this new formatted station in the Fraser Valley in Langley. It was called Coast 800, and it was an alternative modern rock station. They had just switched formats for the 3rd time in 2 years. And so he was chewing through salespeople pretty fast, and he was looking for some salespeople. And we had this really great conversation. He said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, I was like 25, and I'm like, I want to get a job that I can work Monday to Friday, and I can make enough money to buy a car and go on a trip once in a while, maybe buy a house, live like a normal human being instead of couch surfing and having my UI checks go to General Delivery Vancouver, BC. For real. So he said, well, I've got that. Why don't you come see me? So I ended up getting hired as a sales rep at this alternative radio station. So this was back into radio. I took a couple years out from being behind the mic, and I got hired as a sales guy. So they put me through the the VHS sales training, and they were playing Depeche Mode. They were playing Happy Mondays. They were playing Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Soundgarden and Red Hot Chili Peppers before anybody knew who they were.
Okay.
And this was a really cool radio station. And so I put 2 and 2 together, and I listened to that music, and I was, at the time I was dating a girl who was going to UBC, so it was kind of like college radio with ads. And it was great. And the guy running it was a guy by the name of David Marsden, who, if you grew up in Toronto, you know who Dave Mickey was. This is the Dave Mickey. I mean, he's a legendary broadcaster, and now he's my boss.
He's like the Canadian version of Casey Kasem.
Absolutely, 100%.
That's exactly who this guy was. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's doing a podcast in Ontario. And I've stayed in touch with him. Dave Marsden's a genius. Anyway, so I landed at this radio station. Just like, how did this happen? And within 3 months, I was the top billing sales guy. I said, yeah, I got this, right? I'm taking this really cool audience that I can relate to, and I'm going to invite them to your business.
Yeah.
And you just pay me, and we'll run ads, and they'll come and see you. Are you okay with that? Yeah. Okay. And it worked, right? Really dedicated audience. Terrible numbers in the BBM, the ratings. Like I used to joke about it. We were number 17 with an anchor because we were the bottom of the market. There were only 17 stations in Vancouver at the time. So, but we had 60,000 listeners who were fanatical, and they would do whatever we asked them to do. Right? It was so cool. We had so much fun.
Sounds fun.
It was a blast. I mean, Pearl Jam walks in the station, gives us a gold record. We present. Nirvana's playing at the Commodore. We're the only radio station allowed on site.
That's really
Lollapalooza
cool.
comes in, and it's Lollapalooza 2. We were the only radio station allowed on the grounds.
What?
And this was headlining. Who did we have? We had, oh my gosh, we had Red Hot Chili Peppers, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, all in one day. It was crazy. Much fun.
So
much
crazy.
Fun. I had a blast. My using kicked up a few notches when I was there.
I bet.
I had a VIP access to all the clubs in Vancouver.
Oh, yeah.
Which was kind of fun. I could just call up Drew at the Commodore and say, hey, you got Sarah McLaughlin's playing tonight. Can I get in? Oh, yeah, for sure. You're on the list. So I just walked to the front of the line, and I'm Jamie. Oh, hey, Jamie, welcome in. It was pretty
Living
cool.
the life.
Yeah, and I was 27.
Yeah.
And I just about joined the 27 Club.
I can kind of empathize with that. I was a rock star with muscle in my active addiction.
Right.
Yeah, I hung around with motorbike enthusiast groups.
Wow.
So
super cool.
So it was like you called, we own the bar.
Right.
Right.
Nice.
it was the same
Nice.
feeling.
Yeah.
And it really is that same feeling.
Absolutely. It's a feeling of power, right?
Yeah.
You know?
And you're drunk on the power more so than you're even drunk on the booze or the drugs or whatever the hell's that's there.
That's when the ego thing starts to kick in, right?
100%.
For sure.
Yeah, ego.
100.
Yeah. So here I am. I'm living in Kitsilano. I'm working for the coolest radio station in Vancouver. I've got, I'm on the guest list of every bar in the market. It was pretty good. My brother was, I had some connections. Let's put it that way. So I had an unlimited supply of snow.
Yeah, there you go.
And
Not the one that you went down the hill on.
No, this is Vancouver, right? Where it rains. The only snowstorms were in my apartment. Yeah. Me and Scarface. Say hello to my little friend. It kind of all culminated in October of '92, my drinking and drugging and everything. And we had a party. Had some drinks. I went for beers with my boss. The Blue Jays had just won the American League East championship, so we were celebrating. He was a retired. He used to play. He was a quarterback for the Blue Bombers.
Okay.
And I got into radio sales, and so Bud and I had beers, and then I went for dinner with my brother, and we had some drinks, and then we got some scotch, and then we went back to my apartment, and we cooked up some coke and snorted and. Well, we didn't. We snorted a little, and then we smoked the rest till 5. And then he left, and I'm sitting there in my apartment, and I'm wasted, and it's a Wednesday night, Thursday morning, and I've got to go to work in 3 hours. And so my wasted mind says, I guess I should stay up. Because if I go to sleep, I'm not going to be able to wake up and call in time, and I'll just be a no-show. And I can't be a no-show, so I better call in sick. Yeah. So this is what's going on in my wasted mind.
I've had those.
You've had those conversations with yourself? Yeah. So I'm having that conversation with myself. And I'm thinking, well, I better go outside and get some fresh air. So I open up my balcony door, and I go out on my balcony, and I have a smoke. And I'm like, I should sit down. And so I'm too lazy to bring a chair out there, so I hop up on the railing, because I've done that before, and I went to hook my feet through the rails, and I missed.
Oh, fuck.
And I lived on the 3rd floor, and I went over backwards. And I had a spiritual experience on the way down.
I bet you did.
I had a conversation with God. I mean, I went to Bible camp as a kid, and I had a kind of a on and off relationship with God as a teenager, and as I'm falling off my balcony, I'm connecting with him right now, right? I'm checking in, saying, "Hey, I'm coming home now." Like, I knew I was going to die, right? I'm like, it's all over, and it was a remarkably peaceful feeling. It was absolute perfect serenity. I was like, okay, there was no regrets, no guilt, no shame, no remorse, nothing. I just felt peace, and that's my last conscious thought. I hit the ground, and of course I was knocked out. And my next conscious thought, I see this white light, and I'm thinking, well, I guess this is heaven or hell or wherever I'm going next. And it was funny because I was thinking that I was about to meet God face to face, and then I felt pain, and then I knew I was still alive.
Yeah.
And then they gave me something, and I went back to sleep, and I woke up the next day, and my parents are there. They've flown in from Prince George. I'm in intensive care at Vancouver General, and I have a basal skull fracture, and I've fractured 3 vertebrae in my neck, and I broke my collarbone and my radius, and should have died. Or best case scenario, I mean, I broke the same vertebrae as Superman did.
Christopher Reeves.
Yeah. And, he was a high quad.
Yeah.
And so I was like, the nurses, doctors, every time they saw me, they're just shaking their heads, and they're going, I can't believe you're not headed for a wheelchair or dead, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is unbelievable. So I spent 2 weeks in the hospital. They bolted on a halo brace and sent me home. And then I went to AA because, hey, maybe I've got a drinking problem, you think?
Yeah.
And so I sobered up because, well, I couldn't get high in the hospital, right? Because they weren't about to bring that to me. And my girlfriend stopped speaking to me after that night. So her parents came to see me in the hospital, but she and I were done. And I went home. And I remember sitting in my apartment with this halo brace on. I can't drive. I can't work. My employer was fantastic. They took care of my benefits and they put me on disability and everything, even though it was completely self-induced. And I just sat there and I started thinking about my life. And so I went back to AA, right? Because when I broke up with my wife, my first wife, it wasn't long before I started drinking again, right? It kind of dawned on me one morning. I'm like, hey, she's not here anymore.
I can drink now.
I can drink now.
Yeah.
Permission granted.
And I'll never forget. I remember clear as day walking down the street to the David Thompson Hotel in Kamloops and ordering a tequila and a beer, right?
Isn't that funny when we get memory loss, right?
Yeah.
Because it's forgetfulness. Like we all of a sudden switch that we were not drinking for them when really we decided not to drink for us in the beginning, and then it's like we forgot, and it's like, well, I haven't been drinking because that bitch has been around, or whatever, right? And then it's like, well, she's not here anymore.
Might as well drink.
And we just totally forgot that we were not drinking because we could not actually drink.
Exactly.
And there's those moments of clarity I think any addict has, or any alcoholic has. Like I do a lot of step 5s.
Right. Wow.
For people.
Good for
I'm
you.
on the step 5 list or whatever.
Oh, okay.
And so, in general terms, it's all your fault. I mean, it's one of these things where you come out with the sentence saying, well, look at that person harmed you, right? Sure they did. And, what was your responsibility in all of it? And they said, well, yeah, you were using and drinking.
Mm-hmm.
That person would have never been in your life if you decided the first time you were a blackout drunk not to continue your career as a drunk.
Right.
Right? You knew that you were not right after your first blackout drunk. You knew you weren't like everybody else. So that's where you are responsible in the perpetuation of your disease. And once they realize right from the beginning they've been fooling themselves, then it's like the light bulb goes on like, fuck. Fuck. and then the next thing you hear is, but let's not sell the farm here because you're responsible. This means you're also responsible for your change. Yeah. And then once you see that onus of exception, like they accept right then and there. And then you read out acceptance is the key to all of my problems today, blah, 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 right? Yeah. And it's a pretty miraculous thing.
Well, it's cool. My ex-wife used to say, learning to love yourself is the definition of change. Right. And that was some pretty good wisdom. Right. And so, first time I quit drinking was for her. Next time I quit drinking was because I broke my neck, and I looked in the mirror every day. And, I remember going down there was a midnight meeting on Granville Street on Friday nights.
It's still there.
It's still there, right?
It's still there.
And I got called up because I'm sitting there with this halo brace on. They're like, you need to tell us what's going on in your world, mister.
Right.
I'm like, oh, me? Okay. And, being the performer I am and being, an egomaniac with an inferiority complex, like most alcoholics, I got up there and I was the poster child for AA. It's like, don't drink and do drugs or you'll look like me.
Yeah.
Right. And, I stayed sober for a while and then I started to feel better. And I was like, and then the brain started talking me into drinking again. It's like, you can have a drink. What? It was the Coke. It wasn't the booze.
Right. There's that
okay, sure.
Again.
Yeah, okay.
Cocaine cured my alcoholism.
Right, yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And then
kept me sober.
Helped me sleep.
So I went back to drinking, and I just kept drinking and, and I just sort of went on with my life and, the chaos continued to ensue and, and then I got a new girlfriend and then I got rid of her and, and a couple of years go by. I moved over to Vancouver Island and still working in radio advertising sales. The Coast 800 experiment failed, unfortunately, not by me. It was the company was sold. And so they fired everybody and sold it. And I went to work for the new guys, and they couldn't make payroll after a couple of weeks or a couple of months. And so I ended up getting a job in Nanaimo. I'd actually turned down a job at the Bear here in Edmonton because my drinking buddy who started with that night ended up leaving Vancouver and was the sales manager at the Bear. And he said, dude, you should come to Edmonton. I'm like, ugh, Edmonton. Ugh. Because I was from Vancouver, right?
Yeah.
And back then, Rogers didn't own the Bear. I think they own it.
It was Craig Broadcasting at the time. They used to own City TV too. Yeah. So, or A Channel then, I think it was. So
I think they went bankrupt.
They sold everything and shut down. Yeah. But it was really cool when I ended up in Nanaimo because I didn't want to go to Nanaimo because it's Nanaimo, but I ended up in Nanaimo. The the drinking, partying continued, and I ended up meeting a girl, and she's my current wife, 23 years later. So we're still married. And so she caught me kind of at the, I'd grown a little bit. I was a little bit older, a little more mature, but I still was a raging alcoholic, right? And so we got married. She had a little girl. My daughter was 3 when we got married. And so we left the island and we moved out here to Alberta, and we ended up in Lloydminster. And that's when my drinking really started to take off again. And she's like newly married to this lunatic living in the prairies, with this kid, and she's stuck with me, right? And then we had some babies. We had 3 more, and the fighting continued, and because, and then I moved to Edmonton, and then I was still working in radio sales and sales management, and, the career went down in Lloyd, and then it picked up again when I got to Edmonton, and then I got promoted, and I was working with this guy in Calgary who was my new boss, and we were the national regional sales team for a network of 14 radio stations. And so my boss is in Calgary, and I'm here, and we had we'd have sales meetings. My first sales meeting, I went to Calgary. He said, take the bus. So I did. So I took the Red Arrow down, and we had lunch, and we met at this Italian place. We had some drinks at the Italian place, and then we grabbed a case of beer and went back to his place, the other sales guy and me and the boss, and we sat in his hot tub and smoked a fatty or 2, and and that was the sales meeting. And I'm going to like this guy.
Yeah.
And so that was my career was now involved with, very typical, we're going for beers at lunch, we're going for drinks, we're going to go to this party, we're going to do that. I started making more and more money. I was making big money. I had 4 kids, 3 of them were little. And I was running up and down Highway 2 from Edmonton to Calgary every week. And so I kind of set up a system in true alcoholic fashion. I said, well, I'll behave myself in Edmonton. I'm around my wife. I'm the husband. I'm the dad. So I'll keep a lid on it. I'll have a couple of beers, but I'll take it easy, right? But then Sunday after supper, I'm driving to Calgary because I work Monday, Tuesday in Calgary, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I'm back here. So Sunday night, I hit Calgary. And I would stop at I called it the Last Chance Liquor Store. It was at 23rd and Gateway in Calgary Trail South, and I'd whip in there right next to Save On Foods. I'd grab a 6-pack of Canadian, a pack of Players Light, and I'd light them up. And I'd be halfway through the 6-pack by the time I got to Calgary, and then the game's on. 3 beers in, let's go. And, I'd work a little and I'd party a lot in Calgary, and then I'd come home and then I started white knuckling it when I got home because I couldn't drink as much when I was in Edmonton as I did in Calgary. And then I had this tug of war going on, and then Stampede happened. We were a major sponsor at the Stampede because we were a cluster of 11 country radio stations. So, I was there to work, air quotes again. And so I went to this event. I was a member of the Calgary Marketing Association. And so we had a Stampede breakfast, which is a legendary thing in Calgary, where you start drinking first thing in the morning.
Yeah. And they actually extend liquor sales for that.
Calgary is drunk for 10 days every year, and everything shuts down. And so this was my first Stampede. And in true alcoholic fashion, I jumped in feet first, cowboy boots first. Yeah. And so we started out with the Kickapoo Joy Juice in the morning, and we had a live band, and we were at the Palliser, the Fairmont Palliser in downtown Calgary. It was very upscale and fancy, and we were all drunk by 9 o'clock in the morning. And so by noon, we're at Cowboys. Because I had a tent in downtown Calgary, and so we're at Cowboys partying at noon, and then it just continued on all day. And then I ended up phoning my wife at some point. I was lost and staggering around Calgary looking for my car or my hotel room, whichever I could find first. Fortunately, I didn't find my car. And I had this drunken conversation with her, and I made no sense because I'd been drinking for 12 hours.
Yeah.
And so I went to my hotel room and I passed out. And I had a spiritual moment at 3 a.m. I woke up in the middle of the night with this feeling of, this stops now. I can't do this anymore. Right? I was living a double life. Yeah. And I had to stop. And I just had this feeling of deadness that I had to deal with, right? And so when I woke up in the morning, I discovered that I wasn't supposed to be in that hotel room. I was supposed to be checked out. So a coworker showed up at the hotel room who was supposed to be there, and he had to go get a room somewhere else. So now my boss is pissed. Well, he's putting out the fires for his boss.
Yeah.
And so I went home and I called my wife and I said, I'm coming home. I've got to deal with my drinking. I'm going to go to an AA meeting. And she said, okay. And what I found out later is she was making plans for life without me with 4 kids. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
You know? Ugh. And
Isn't that what Al-Anon tells them, though, right?
Right.
I mean, everything was good till my wife went to Al-Anon and then my bags were on the porch. Fuck you, Al-Anon. No, I'm kidding. Al-Anon's an amazing program.
It is an amazing program. Yeah. It's a gift for sure.
Yeah.
So I got back to St. Albert, and it was a Thursday night, and I found a meeting, and and I walked in, and there's a guy there named Rick who reached out and said, "Hi, welcome. Have a seat. Can I get you coffee?" And I was home. I was home, right? And I jumped in, and I was sober for 4 months. And then I was back in Calgary. My job didn't change. My boss didn't change.
All the same.
I stopped drinking.
Yeah.
Right. And I talked to my boss about it and said, look, I can't drink anymore. I've got a problem. And he's like, okay, cool. He was totally supportive of it.
Can you smoke weed? No, I'm kidding. I'm just
sure. Yeah. We did smoke a joint at one point, and that was like, yeah, no, I shouldn't be doing this either. And then I was sitting in a restaurant. I was in Calgary working, and I'd had a bad day, and I ordered a Coke like I usually do. And then the waitress was walking away, and again, like the David Thompson moment, she's walking away. I'm like, wait. Make it a Canadian. And I made a conscious decision to start drinking again.
Did you chase it with milk?
No whiskey and milk for me.
That's an AA joke,
yeah,
Chelsey.
it is. Yeah, it's in the back part of the book.
Yeah.
So we were, I was in and out for like 6 months after that. And then my sponsor sat me down. He said, dude, you're killing yourself. You should make a decision. Either you're in or you're out.
Yeah.
Right? Make a decision. And so I'd gotten to that point where I was now willing to do whatever it takes to get the program. And so I hooked up with a new sponsor who walked me through all the steps, not just the first 3. And so we got to step 4 pretty quickly and step 5. And then my life changed. Mm-hmm. And the desire to drink was gone.
For anybody out there listening, there is a promise in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous that says if you do your step 5, honestly, you will have a spiritual awakening by the end of that process. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you that's where my obsession for drugs and alcohol was lifted after step 5.
Yeah.
I did it with the infamous Father Jim Holland here in Edmonton.
Oh, wow. Good for you.
So he did my step 5. And that was a pretty amazing moment.
Yeah. If you're in the program and you haven't done your 4th and 5th step and you're scared of it, it's okay. We were all scared when we go into
ourselves.
It. Oh, I know. The 4th step was like terrifying. And I remember starting on it and I was like, I'm talking to my sponsor. I'm like, I don't know. He goes, okay, here's some advice. He said, start with the worst thing you've ever done. That one thing that you were going to take to your grave. Start there. And I just like, are you shitting me?
Yeah.
And he goes, yeah. And I was just, what? And then I just kind of like, I'd gotten to that point in my life. I was like, you know what? I have to.
See, Chelsey and I had a conversation
off
air a little while ago. She's going to come and take a big book study from me.
Oh, cool.
And I've got one of my female sponsees. See, I don't agree with this whole... I agree with men in early recovery when you're sponsoring.
Right.
So like here in Edmonton, I've heard from AA. So I'm a Cocaine Anonymous member. Mm-hmm. But I also go to AA meetings, and I've heard from some of the older timers in AA.
Yeah.
You can't sponsor till you're 5 years in.
Oh, no, that's ridiculous.
I'm like, you know what? The big book never said that. What the big book did say is as soon as you're done a set of steps, you need to sponsor
give it away.
The second you just finished your set of steps.
Absolutely.
So
you can't keep it unless you give it away.
That's right. So one of the things is I do have a female sponsee, and I'm in contact with her to come and do Chelsey's 5.
Great.
Because we work together, and I probably don't really want to walk through a 5 with her.
That would be wise.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
good for you.
And so that'll be
So you haven't done your 5th step yet?
No, I haven't done my steps. No.
Awesome.
So we're gonna do the whole.
We planned it though.
Yeah.
For this month.
I'm super excited to hear.
It'll be done
goes.
by the end of July for sure.
Yeah. We're gonna. And so when the way how I was trained to do it is you do all the set of steps, and basically you start Friday evening, you finish them Sunday. Mm-hmm. There's no fucking around. It's done. You only have to sit in your shit for from Saturday to Sunday on your 4.
Yeah.
Sunday morning you come in and you do your 5. That's a done deal. And then we work through it. Yeah. We highlight what we need to highlight. It's basically the Bill and Bob
Yeah. Well, that's how it was done
Charlie,
originally.
no, it's Charlie and what the fuck's his name?
Joe and Charlie.
Joe and Charlie.
Yeah.
It's the Joe and Charlie format of the Big
Oh,
Book
it's
Study.
great. It's great.
So we're going to go through that, and we do it within 2 days, and there's all the queuing in there and stuff.
That's fantastic.
I think this will be, like, I think I've done it over 50 times now.
Wow,
Big
good
Book
for
Studies.
you.
Yeah, I mean, I love them.
Good for you.
I don't sponsor anymore.
Yeah.
That's how I sponsor over the weekend.
That's a gift.
Yeah, it's
That's
a hell of a lot of fun. I love
So you do
doing
the
it.
Joe and Charlie tapes? You run through the whole thing?
No, I read it.
Oh, you read it?
I sit there. My sponsor comes. I've got 4 other readers that come in.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I'll read, and then there's another person where we switch back and forth.
Yeah.
And we'll say hi like this. We read the whole 164 pages.
Good for you.
Yeah.
I love it.
All the way through.
You know, that was one of the first things I did when I came back in this time, and as I organized a big book study at my church I was going to. I said, hey, can we use the church foyer at like Saturday mornings? I said, sure. And I'm a morning guy. And I said, okay, who's in? 8 o'clock Saturday morning, we're going to go through the big book. And we just read for an hour. And then we would talk about what we read. And we'd go through the book. And I think we ran through it in about a month, 6 weeks, right? The 164 pages. And I've done a couple Joe and Charlie tapes, big book studies too. And
you can get them on an app too.
I've got it on my phone.
Yeah.
It's a free download, free app. It's, you know, the recovery is amazing because there's so much support out there. Recovery in this town, especially. You know, we're really blessed here in Edmonton.
We're lucky.
There is so many good resources here and so many great people.
We actually got Chelsey through a message on Facebook saying that the show had dramatically changed her recovery. And then Chelsey just got that same message from somebody in Texas who's been listening to the show.
Right? Yeah,
Shout
you
out
mentioned
Texas.
that to me. Yeah.
So it's pretty, the power behind this is unreal, right? And I think a big thing too that I've always tried to disseminate throughout this podcast is the fellowships are great for your beginning microcosm community culture because they're the most forgiving people. And then eventually you have to leave that to find air quotes normies because
Or you're going to have to learn how to function in society, right?
That's right.
You know, I mean, I have my home group, you know, it's Tuesday night in St. Albert, and I'm there every Tuesday night, almost every Tuesday night. I mean, it's a priority for me. And I go to a couple other meetings a week. I mean, I've been sober for more than 15 years.
Good for
since
you.
I last took a drink or smoked a dope or snorted a line or anything. I've been clean and sober.
You write on lines now? You don't do them?
Yeah, something like that.
Cocaine Anonymous. That's a joke.
Yeah. No, I got into smoking at the end. So, freebase, man. It was crazy. But yeah, you know, it's sobriety's been a real gift. I mean, I'm still married. You know, we're celebrating 23 years this year. So the first 8 were pretty rough for her.
Yeah.
Right. And then my kids, you know, my oldest is 26. She remembers me as a drinker. My others are 16, 18, and 20, and they don't remember. Right.
Wow.
Well,
That's good though.
You know, which is great.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, I've had these moments because I grew up in a family, you know, of alcoholics, and, you know, my brothers were users and alcoholics, and my parents and grandparents. I mean, everybody. It was the world we lived in. And, you know, I sit around the dining room table sometimes. I remember when my kids were like, you know, my boys were like 16, 14, 15, 16. And that's when the police were showing up at my house.
Yeah.
Right. And we've got all sorts of chaos going on. Right. And, you know, because I've gotten drunk and shot off the 12 gauge in the backyard because I was pissed off at somebody, you know, because I was a drunken idiot, right?
Yeah.
You know, because I'm an alcoholic. And so I'm sitting there and my boys are like normal, right? And they're having normal lives. And then, you know, they turn into adults and they're like, yeah, you know, I had a couple of drinks and then I was good. And so, which is weird to watch normal people drink.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, as an alcoholic, it's like, what? And
You
so
put the bottle away?
Yeah,
I know, right?
What's wrong with
well,
you?
we did Cinco de Mayo this year, 5th of May, right? And so I said, oh, you know what? My 18-year-old's a bartender, right? At you know, and I said, hey, why don't we make margaritas, right? And have Cinco de Mayo and tacos and stuff, and we'll make some virgin margs for me and you know, your mom. My wife doesn't really like to drink because it just brings back bad memories for her. And so, but the kids, you know, you're 18 and 20, you guys can have some tequila if you want. And so I actually went to the store and bought the tequila, which is something I rarely do, is go into a liquor store. But,
a reason and a purpose, though.
Absolutely.
Like the book says, if you have a reason and a purpose, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to walk into a bar if you have a reason and a purpose to do so. And that's the lift of the obligation of wanting to
Absolutely.
drink, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I have yet to walk into a liquor store. I realized that yesterday because I had.
Don't test it yet.
Wait till you've done your fifth step.
I know. That's what I've been thinking. And I've had hosted drinking events at my house through my nutrition business. Like
Right.
I've had people there drinking in front of me and it doesn't bother me. I've had liquor in my house overnight. It doesn't bother me. But then yesterday I was like, hey, I haven't been in a liquor store yet. I haven't actually gone in and purchased it yet. And I was like, I don't know if I'm ready. Like, I don't know if I'll be bothered by it after.
Right.
And I've had so many big changes this month. I'm like, I think I won't test myself.
Good.
Yeah.
Good news.
And if both of you guys say wait till after my fifth step, then I guess
I
those
walked
are
into
wise
a liquor
words.
store.
Yeah.
Like, there was a function going on in the studio over the weekend, and so I walked into a liquor store with somebody because they went and bought a couple bottles of wine because the ladies wanted wine or whatever. And as he was sitting there picking it out, I was like, "Fuck, just pick it out." Because I'm an alcoholic.
Right.
Yeah.
Fucking Pinot Grigio, grab that fucker, put it on ice, and slam that bitch down. That's
Yeah.
all I'm thinking in my head,
100%.
right? But this guy's actually looking at the bottle to see what it might taste like. And I'm like, what the
Oh,
fuck
man.
is
Wine
wrong
has
with
taste.
you? I just know it's dry. If it's
Well,
red and white is good.
Right.
Like, that's all.
Yeah.
Well, Cinco de Mayo, I mean, my kid's making margaritas, so he's got the triple sec and he's got the tequila on the counter,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And, and then they made the margaritas and then, they put the lid back on the tequila. I said, you can put the lid back on?
Right.
What? You can't do that. Tequila, no, you drink tequila till it's gone and then yeehaw.
We used to do
Right.
this thing where we would time how fast you get your bottle deposit back.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
yeah.
drink-
There are many stories.
I mean, I'm glad that the drinking is gone, and I'm glad that obsession is not there. I'm glad that like I go to AA because I'm a baby in AA with the amount of sobriety time I have.
Right.
And CA, it's not quite like that. I've gone to CMA, which is Crystal Meth Anonymous, which does exist out there. It's pretty big in the States.
That's cool.
And they're like, what? You have more than 4 weeks? And they're just looking around at you. And you're like, yeah. Like I said a little while ago in a meeting, and I've said it here on the podcast, I don't know what it is to be high anymore.
That's good.
I really don't know what it is to be drunk anymore. I have to go to meetings in order to hear those newcomers
That's
come
right.
in.
And be reminded.
And I, when I was a newcomer, never thought I would be in the place of some fucking person saying, I don't know what it is to be high, but I'm still here.
It took me the longest time to wrap my brain around the fact that they said the newcomer is the most important part of the meeting. I'm like, what the hell? It's about me.
Yeah.
And now, of course, after many years in the program, I'm like, oh yeah, I get it now. Because when people come back or people come in for the first time, it's like, oh yeah, it's still hell out there.
Let me ask you this, because we for sure see people in the limelight abusing alcohol and drugs. Even the people in the entertainment business who are behind the scenes, such as yourself in
Right.
sales, so on and so forth. When you were sober, did you continue, like really sober, steps done, so on and so
Yeah.
forth? Did you continue being a sales rep for a radio company? Were
Yeah.
you able to pull that off? And how did you pull it off? Like,
It was an interesting journey because I actually left the radio station shortly after I sobered up. Yeah, let me think about the timelines here because I sobered up that first time after Stampede, and then I managed about 4 months, and I was in and out till the spring of the following year. And my last drink, I was out with my boss in Calgary. I had my last drink in Calgary, and he had this pub. We called it Pints and Half Pints. It was up the hill from his house, and so we'd go there after work and have some beers, and he'd hit the VLTs, and typical scene. And we had a couple of beers, and then we went outside to smoke a joint, and then I blacked out. And then I woke up in my hotel room, and it was like, oh shit, it happened again, right? And this was in March of 2004. Wow. And so I look out the hotel window, and I'm like, phone up my boss, and dude, where's my car? And he's like, oh, you were funny last night. I said, what happened? He goes, well, after you smoked a joint, you got in your car and you passed out. So I called a cab and I put you in the taxi so you didn't get arrested. I said, thanks, appreciate that. And so that was the last time I had a drink. That was the last time I had a cigarette. I quit smoking and drinking the same day. That's it, I'm done. And then I came back into the program, and that was in March of 04. In July of 04, well, in April of 04, he was fired. They closed my office. All hell broke loose at work. And by July, I had a new job. So I took a job as sales manager for a new radio station, and I worked with them for 4 years, 3.5 years. And then I stayed in radio sales, and then I left there and I went to an ad agency and I started selling websites, all sober, of course. This is all since I sobered up. And then, so I bounced a bit, right? Yeah. And then I was at this ad agency for 6 months, and I came in the end of 2007 when the economy was absolutely on fire. And by the summer of 2008, it was over. It was like terrible.
Yeah.
And so these guys, the ad agency cut my salary to a third of what it was before.
Oh, wow.
And so I went and got another job because I couldn't afford to work there anymore. And I'd, of course, bought a $50,000 SUV, and I'd taken my family to Disneyland, and I'd spent a whole bunch of money that I didn't have.
Yeah.
And I was really in a deep pile of shit financially.
Yeah.
And so then I went to a friend of mine had a promo company. And he was an artist, a really cool promo company, T-shirts, hats, pens, cups.
We should talk to him.
Yeah, absolutely. Super
Seriously,
cool guy.
We should talk to him.
Well, hook you up.
We're looking for a deal.
Yeah. Spark, the branding shop.
Awesome.
Glenn Ronald, he's a superstar, and he's a killer artist, amazing painter. Anyway, he's out in Sherwood Park. So I worked with Glenn for about 1.5 years as his general manager, and again, through that 2008, 2009 period, it was hell. I mean, the economy just collapsed. So I had a couple months of no income. And then I was like, I need to get a job. And so I went to Yellow Pages, and I worked at Yellow Pages, and they were at the point of transitioning out of the book into a digital company.
Yeah.
And so I went through all the digital training. I got Google certified, and I was really focused on digital solutions for clients. And I've been sort of in that space, in and out of that space ever since. I left Yellow Pages after a couple of years, went to the Canadian Traffic Network, and really cool job.
Yeah.
You know, they provide the traffic reports, the helicopter reports for all the radio stations and TV stations in Canada. And so my job consisted of selling ads and taking clients for helicopter rides.
That's so cool.
And playing golf. So it was fun.
Cool.
Yeah, it was great. And so I figured, okay, this is it. I'm good, right? Everything's great. Everything's fine. But, you know, I'm an alcoholic with ADD.
Yeah.
So a friend of mine said, hey, let's have lunch. I got this cool thing I need your advice on. I'm like, okay. So we went sit down, and they were a streaming company that had they used to own Sonic. They launched Sonic.
Okay.
And they started a streaming company.
Who this is.
Yeah. Stream On, Roger and Andrew.
Yeah.
So anyway, Roger and Andrew and I have lunch, and they show me this thing that was called, what did they call it at the time? Listen Later. And basically it was a PVR for the radio.
Yeah.
That, you know, you could go onto the player on your smartphone or your tablet or your computer, and you could back up the radio station, or you could grab a clip and share it. It was killer technology. Yeah. This is 2012. And so I went to a radio show with them just on spec, and we went down to Dallas, and we had a great time, and we hung out for 3 days, and I ended up working for them for 5 years.
Wow.
Until the company was sold to a U.S. software company. A big U.S. software company bought it. And Roger took his check and went back to raising horses and managing buildings and doing what he does.
Because that's how Sonic started. It was an old license that was floating around that wasn't really being used, and it was in that Nisku area. Sonic blew up so much that they were able then to pull it into Edmonton. But that's how I was told that whole thing kind of...
It's a bit of a myth.
...really got going.
What actually happened is they applied for the license in Edmonton.
Oh, okay.
But they didn't have studio space.
Oh.
And so what they did is they said, you know, they got the license. And when you get a license, you have 2 years to make it live. Mm-hmm. So they had the license. The floating around part was true, right? They had the license, but they hadn't launched it yet because they didn't have a place to put the studio. So they said, let's just get an ATCO trailer and park it in Nisku. Right near the transmitter. So it's close. You know, so we had an eye line to the transmitter. So they put the trailer out in Nisku, and that's when they hired Garner and started Sonic. And because Garner is who he is, he's a genius. He said, "Well, this is brilliant." And so he turned it into a whole marketing campaign, right? And so so that's. And then when they sold us Sonic and the rest of the radio stations in 2006. They had invented this streaming technology that was really simple to set up for a radio station and worked really well. And it worked on any device without an app, which is a big deal in the mid-2000s. So you didn't need an app to play a stream on an iPhone.
Yeah.
And they were the first company in the world to do that. And so they took that streaming company and they started offering it as a service to radio stations around the world. Yeah. And they had 150 clients at the time. Well, I started with them in 2012, and then we did that plus the podcasting. And so then I was going to the NAB show in Vegas, and I was going to all these radio shows and all over North America. And Yeah, it was an amazing experience. I met some really incredible people.
Yeah, we're gonna have to talk off air.
Yeah.
I'd like to buy you dinner. Actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
We should.
Let's do it.
Yeah, we should.
It was so much fun.
Conversation.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. I ended up introducing the parties that bought the radio station, or bought the streaming company, I should say. And I worked for them for a couple of years, and they were based in Cleveland. And good company, but they're huge.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that we're currently faced with here in the podcasting world is how saturated it is. Not in Canada.
No,
but you're not.
It's still in its infancy here, really.
But you're not just Canadian, though.
No,
You're global.
Absolutely.
Right? And I'll put it to this way: we're looking at fuck these people too, because we can do this on this show. But we were working with an insurance company who owns a building downtown here in Edmonton, and we were going to use them for studio space,
right?
Because it would be nicer than where we are right now, and they went on, and we were going to do shout-outs like live from. Such and such place, downtown Edmonton, and and they went on our blog page and they saw Chelsey had written a blog about dick pics.
Yeah,
because we challenged her.
I was just telling the story yesterday
to do a blog about dick pics. The reason for it was we had a photographer. So we had a photographer in the show where he said, and he's got all these beautiful women on his Instagram page. Jeff Woodward, shout out Jeff Woodward.
Yep.
He's coming back on the show. He's booked actually.
Nice. Oh, awesome.
So, anyways, he was talking about. He's like, how many dick pics I get on my shit because I have all these beautiful women.
Right.
And they think that and if you were to see Jeff, he is not attractive to the eye at all for a man. Well, maybe to some men, but
he's not your type.
The other co-host that we had was like, I was hoping it was a woman and then you came in. Yeah. It was one of those things.
Yeah.
And so anyways, Jeff had good fun with it. And anyways, we challenged Chelsey on that show to be like, I bet you she gets a ton of dick pics. She's attractive woman and all this stuff. And she actually wrote an amazing piece. Like
it is good. It is good. I kept it classy, funny, but it's good.
It's we'll bring it back. So we only keep the last 18 blogs on our page, and then we get rid of the other ones. But we'll bring it back as a classic, I'm sure somewhere around. Anyways, so Chelsey wrote this blog about it, and they didn't even read the article because it was about why she didn't understand why boys take dick pics of themselves in adolescence and then send it off. Yeah. And then the other co-host that we had wrote the rebuttal to it. Why guys do it following day, right? And so this girl who worked for this management company for this insurance people said we wouldn't want any of our clientele looking at dick pics. And I'm like, but you should have maybe read it.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the double-edged sword when it comes to being free without CRTC.
Exactly, right.
And
making money.
And the judgment, and the judgment that comes from it, right? Because that's you you get into a place where you're looking for specific sponsors who are okay to
absolutely
be brassy. We'll beat them up a little bit on the air and all good fun. You know what I mean? Those kinds of things. I sat down with a dildo company actually who was going to put do sponsor ads on the podcast for their dildos.
Right.
And I was like, I just don't know how many times I could work that into a podcast where we're talking about getting rammed with a dildo all of the time. And it wasn't substantial. And I thought that it would really hurt our pool because
it puts you in a specific box, right? I mean, I've been working in the marketing space for 30 years.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm old. I don't feel it. I act 15. I really feel 15.
Yeah,
but
I hear you.
But I have some level of maturity. My kids and my wife might disagree with you or with me. But yeah, so that's the thing with marketing is you need to find your audience. I mean, it's the days of broadcasting, which is casting a net across the whole planet, are gone. Because everybody has a niche, everybody has a specialty, right? I mean, radio is suffering because they can't be specialized enough.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I just push a button. I got 24 radio stations to choose from. I got a couple favorites. I mean, and I'm that demo. I'm over 35.
Yeah.
quite a bit over 35, and I listen to talk radio. I mean, I listen to sports and talk. If I want music, I've got iTunes. I got a subscription with iTunes and Spotify, and I'll pick my music, right?
And I think now, too, the auto manufacturers, when it comes to putting in the radio stuff now, the first prompt, like before, I don't know if you might know this even, you would go to car dealerships, like big car dealerships, and car dealerships, the radio stations would come in and say, we want to be on your preset number one, right? And they would work a deal with those dealerships to do that. Now, the preset is already determined by the software manufacturer, and guess who that is? It's Apple and Google.
Right.
So it's your plug-in for your phone to your computer, to your audio network within your car, as opposed to picking your favorite radio station and preset one.
I've spent hours and hours and hours listening to expert panels all over the United States talking about the console. Like massive amount of money being spent in research into how to get radio listeners to stay, right? I mean, I was at a conference in San Francisco, and one of the speakers said that, that AM radio is dead. And that car manufacturers are going to stop putting AM in their. I heard. This expert said I heard that the car manufacturers are going to stop putting AM in the cars, and the whole place just lost it. Oh yeah. Right. And the guy who was hosting the conference, he jumped up on the stage and grabbed the microphone and said, "Whoa, this is huge!" And so we had this big, huge debate about it. And I think there's a couple manufacturers of actually not putting AM receivers in their. It's minimal. The other thing that you keep in mind is that the average age of a car in America is 11 years old. So people are driving 2008 vehicles. Yeah. So we're still a couple years before this new technology really kicks radio out of the car. But the car is the only place that radio's got left.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for
sure. Right? Because nobody has who has a radio at home? I mean, I don't have a radio on my smartphone. That's where I get my music from.
I know DJs right now here in the city who are not signing their next contracts. And they're big ones, radio DJs, morning guys.
Wow.
They're just not because, well, and I also.
What are they going to do though? Are they going to start a podcast?
No, they're going to. This is the thing. So I'm not going
to bring it back to podcast. No, that's fine.
But I'm not going to say who exactly it was. They said they cannot go on a long format of podcasting, right? Because they're a persona. And they need the music to break that up because it becomes so like your voice. Right. It becomes monotony after a 4 or 6 hour shift. Right.
And who has time to listen to 4 hours of podcasting?
Well, you look at Joe Rogan, though, who is the highest rated podcast right now. He minimum makes $110,000 per episode.
Nice.
Right. Which is beautiful. I feel that the Canadian market could also be in the same bracket. But I don't think you could have radio DJs do this like what we're doing.
They're not wired that way. They're not trained that way.
And then the other thing is you look at the radio salespeople. They work on commission now, and they just drop their commission to 8%, is what I heard.
Wow. I was getting 15 points back in the day.
Yeah, it used to be even high. Like I heard it was at one time 18 for inflation. Yeah. And now they just cut them 10%, so they're down to 8% on their commission.
Wow, that's harsh.
Like it's, and then they're throwing out DJs. Left, right, and center. Like I was in conversation with a couple of talk radio guys to come on a podcast, and we were talking about the format of the podcast because Life on Live Streams really doesn't have a demographic. The reality is we have salt and peppered recovery throughout the entire show.
Yeah. But it comes up all the time.
But also what we have
part of life.
We've had fighters. Chelsey had a female fighter previously this month. I had a boxing coach come in. We've had Kettlebell Keith, who is on Joe Rogan's podcast, who's been on a couple times. We've had Dr. James Shapiro, right? Like we've had some people come on, and we don't want to be niched. Right. And the reason why I did that is because I'm an ex-drug dealer. Right. And I found out if I was only selling marijuana,
you limit yourself.
Really fucked up. Right? I might as well sell everything.
Might as well open up the whole market, right?
Yeah. Right. And so we try to fashion ourselves where it's actually life on life's terms. Right. As it comes in, that's what we deal with. That's cool. Right. So that's where that whole entire idea and vision of life on life's terms came from.
Beautiful.
Where do you see podcasting going for Canada in the future, I guess?
Well, I think it's still a few years out. But I have, I don't know how many podcasts I've subscribed to. I've got a variety of different tools that I use. I mean, as an outside sales guy, I listen to, professional sales trainers. I listen to preachers. I listen to, oh my gosh, what else do I listen to? I listen to training. That's kind of where I'm at, where my life is at, right? I don't get a lot of entertainment from podcasting personally. I'm more of I watch sports for entertainment. I go out for dinner with my family. I'm a face-to-face person.
Yeah.
I still believe in the power of using all of our senses. But that being said, I think podcasting is going to continue to grow.
Yeah.
I'm worried about radio.
Yeah, me too.
It's been my career for many, many years. It's, my house is because of my job at radio. I have so much because of radio. It's been great to me. I've had a lot of fun in radio. But I don't see radio lasting. This generation, I think it's still okay. The next generation, I think radio's done.
I think the millennials are going to kill radio just like they killed Sears.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
I really believe that.
Yeah, my kids don't listen to radio. They get in the car and they're teenagers, right? And it's like, who's got the aux cord?
Yeah,
right.
for sure.
Right. It's so funny. My daughter and a couple of her friends got in the car with me the other day, and she's got a driver's license, but for some reason I was driving them, and I was picking her up, and she had this guy. He's a bit of an emo kid, he's about 16 and he's into death metal and death punk pop, death rap music and stuff, not really my cup of tea.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm open-minded, right? And that's, so he goes, hey, can I have the aux cord? I want to play these tunes for you. He's trying to impress me. He's a nice kid. Right. And I'm like, okay, sure. So he's playing it and I'm like, the tunes are great, like great music, like really gifted musicians. Right. I hear that, but the lyrics were just too angry, right? There was just too much hate and anger there, right? And and I live in a world where there isn't enough love, right? And it's so important that we bring it out, and that's where the programs taught me is again, learning to love ourselves is the definition of change, and giving away the program, and I go to AA because, and I go to my family because I'm loved, right? And we all need that, we all do as human beings, right? And the lyrics kind of bugged me, and my daughter, I look in the rearview mirror and she's just like, I'm so sorry. She's mouthing, I'm so sorry, Dad. Right. And I'm like, it's okay. I'm cool with it. Right. I'm not going to judge this kid because of his music tastes.
Yeah.
Right. And then he's asking, so what do you think? I said, I like the music. I said, I'm not a big fan of the lyrics.
Well, I kind of think too that this is also a mirror of the outrage kind of sport that we see these younger generation, like the Generation Z doing.
Right.
It's literally a competition of outrage.
Yeah.
And I think that whole entire hate, so on and so forth, is the ambience of that.
Right.
And it's crazy how the echo chamber really works, where it's almost like a predetermination of how outraged you can be just by listening to that music.
Yeah.
Right. I look at my younger brother, who is just graduated high school, 17 years old, and he grew up in the country.
Yeah.
He's just a Northern Ontarian hick.
Right.
Right. And he's not like that at all. He's probably a Trumper, at heart. And he doesn't listen to that stuff at all. He's still listening to the old school, Janine, and has no idea why my mom's nickname is Janine. So if it wasn't subtle enough before, it's out there.
I get it now. Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks for clarifying.
I was playing that all the way through the show, actually. I was waiting to drop that bomb.
Nice.
See, that's the sign of a good podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Mic drop.
Well, Jamie, it was nice having you on the show. We're like 2 hours in, man.
I know, man. This has been fun.
Yeah, it's a great show.
So much fun.
Yeah, it was a great show. Hopefully we'll have you come back.
I'd love that.
I hope you take me up on the dinner offer.
100%.
Because
let's do that.
I'd like to pick your brain for sure.
For sure. I'd love to help.
All right, brother.
Thanks, guys.
I totally matched up a little bro date here.
Well, and then this other guy that she brought in has been asking for me to go hiking with him.
Oh, okay.
So I was a geomatic engineer before.
Oh, okay.
So
right.
I was in the bush all the time.
Yeah, no kidding.
And he's like, I want to go check out this lake. I'm like, I'll take you.
Nice.
Shit.
That'd
He's
be
like,
fun.
There's no trail, though. I'm like, I don't give a fuck.
Who needs a trail?
Like,
a compass.
This.
You'll make a trail.
Yeah, watch this, motherfucker. We're going to weave and bob and all that bullshit. We're getting there.
The animals get there. We can get there, too.
We'll spray them. Fuck you.
Get away from me, bear.
Yeah, exactly.
This is my path.
I may have shit my pants twice and pissed, but I ain't running. Anyways, if you want to wrap it up, Chelsey, that'd be cool. Thanks again for coming in, Jay.
Hey, thanks for having me, you guys.
Totally. All right. Well, if you guys want to find the after show blog, you can find it at www.lifeonlifestermspodcast.com. Jamie, would you like to throw out your social media
Absolutely.
platforms for people to visit?
Pretty easy. Jamie Moffat on Twitter, and J Rock Obama
Fucking
on Instagram.
That's so awesome. That is so awesome. Fucking A. That's so awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, perfect. Well, and you can also find us on Facebook, Life on Life's Terms Podcast, or my Instagram is Chelsey_Life on Life's Terms. Justin, you want to throw yours out there?
Life on Life's Terms Podcast, Twitter. We're there, and every week we have two blogs coming out.
Nice.
So they're very apprehensive.
Two, we think.
Two. And we're hoping to expand. So
Nice.
if you'd like to become a content creator, come and private message us, and we'll see if we can bring you on the show and if we can work out the logistics.
Sweet.
Yeah. So have a beautiful Thursday.
Yes.
This is a Thursday
it's
show.
a Thursday show. Yes.
Bye for now.
Happy
Bye, guys.
Thursday.